Hello, I am back using the Unreal Engine 4, and this time I've created a project using the Paper 2D side-scroller template. Now, if you press play, right here, as you can see, the character would spawn in. If I use the WASD, he moves around in midair, like this, go up and down. And you may notice that he may continue scrolling, even if I have my hand off the keyboard, just like this. Right? So there's no friction added to him. Right? And if I press the spacebar, he would move back to the middle of the screen. Right? Now, another feature is if I hold down the P button, he would stop, and this will disable the user's input, so I can't move him. Now, if I release P, I can go back to using the input. Right? Now, if I hold down the left shift, notice that this is his basic movement. Holding down the left shift would make him move a lot slower, like this, compared to his standard speed. Now, quite the opposite is with the right shift. Now, if I hold that down, he would zoom past the screen like that, right? Accelerating at a much higher rate. Right? And as the last feature for this, if I press the M button instead of the standard escape key, it'll quit the project. I wanted it to be the M button because I wanted it to be noticeable that it exited the project, because escape key does the same thing, but it would escape either way if I assigned it to the escape key or not. So let's look at how I created this. So we're going to go into the project settings, and you'll notice that for the action mapping in the input section, I have the slow that is assigned to the left shift and the sprint assigned to the right shift. And for the axis mapping, I did not really change the move right. That is something that came with the default character that you get when you use a template. So I didn't really change that. I did, however, add the move up function and assign the W, up, S, and down keys. Now notice that for the A key, you would see that it is assigned to -1, and the D key is assigned to +1, along with W being +1 and S being -1. Those are key factors that I'll bring up later. Just a second. Let's go back into the coding of this character. This is the standard web map that I have for this, or the web coding. Right, we're going to look at these two. So this is the movement input. Right? This is the same input as the default character came with, so I didn't really change it, only I made it a little bit different with this one. Oh, but for this one with the input axis move right, with a condition that is greater than 0. Now, if, for example, we press the D key and it's bringing up +1, so if +1 is greater than 0, it would set this boolean to true and add movement input in the x-axis. Right? Now, if we press A, which is -1, and it'll go through this condition, which is less than 0. So if the movement is less than 0, then it'll trigger this branch, which is false from the first one. And if true, it'll turn this boolean off and go negative in the x-axis. If this is false, however, it'll continue with the first line and go positive in the x-axis. Same thing with the move up function, only for this one, I've changed it for the z-axis instead of the y-axis. And you'll notice that it's different, because this is not really standard math graph. With that one, you'd see it only be y and x-axis. For this one, and I'll use the player start as an example. So you can see the green arrow corresponds to y, which is moving side to side. And the blue arrow, which is z, is moving up and down. So it's very different. All right, go back into the coding. All right, look at this. Now this is to disable the input. Now, if we press P and hold it down, it'll switch movement mode to none. And if we release it, it'll switch it to flying mode. The reason I have it like this is to make, in order to make the character move up and down in midair like this, instead of having it switch to, or have it as default walking, it is as default flying if we look into the character movement. With the default land movement mode, I have set it to fly. And you can see that it pulls from that right here. Okay. We'll get into these two last, because those two are a little bit more complicated. So for here, as you can see, if we press the M key, it just straight up quits the program. Simple as that. Really. So that's why, because it would, like I referenced earlier, it would do the same thing if I press the escape key. But so I wanted it to be different. And if I press the spacebar, it'll then teleport the actor to the destination, which is the same as the player start that I've added right here. And for this last one, this is for the particle system. So that exploding particle system that you see earlier. Actually, let me, just in case, let me show that off one more time. If I haven't earlier. If I press B, then the character would randomly explode, like that. So, for this one, it's a particle system being triggered here, and I can do it as much time as I wanted. I haven't changed it to really do anything. It's just for visual effects. And I have to wait for a short timer delay, but that's all the B does. So going back, so on while B is pressed, it will activate the particle system that I've in place. Now, for this one, you have noticed earlier that I have mentioned about the action mapping on slow and sprint for these ones. So, for that, I've created 3 floats, right? Each with different values. For the walk speed, I have made it 1000, which is the standard walk speed, or fly speed, as I should say. For the slow speed, I have made it 300. And for the sprint speed, I've made it 5000. A huge difference, but for noticeable results. Okay. So I then went along and made 4 functions, as you can see down here. So for the start slow, as you can see the start slow, if the left mouse key, or no, I'm sorry, left shift is held down, it'll set the max fly speed to slow, so 300, and it's grabbing from the character movement. And when it's released, it'll then set the max fly speed to the standard walking speed. Same thing with the sprint speed. When the right shift is pressed, it'll then set the speed to the sprint speed. And when on released, it'll set it to the walk speed. Right. And so what these do, this is inputting the action. So this is ensuring that if the left, pardon me, shift is pressed, then it'll start this function. And when it's released, it'll start this function. Same with this one. So now let's look at the game mode. So I didn't really change anything except for this default pawn class, which as you can see, it is made for our first character, or the character that we're using. Right? And if we go into the world settings, it is then grabbing the game mode character, or I'm sorry, the first game mode, right? Is setting that as the default game mode, Okay. And lastly, for this camera, what I had to do is go into the level blueprints, and on begin play, it sets the view target with blend, and it references the camera actor as the new target and the player controller. So that's all that does. Now, this is all, that's my project. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.